morning, gentlemen. Good to see you guys again.
Good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back.
Well?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. So, we've talked a lot about Agile, different aspects of it, from modeling to testing to the scaling of Agile. And I get how it works in large organizations. But I did some research in our break, and I looked at the Agile Manifesto. And, in reading it, some of the tenets of the manifesto seem to contradict the notion of governance. I was wondering if you guys can talk me down.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of opportunity for governance in the Agile world, and I've been arguing for years that Agile projects are actually easier to govern than traditional projects due to the greater visibility, the greater collaboration. But there's also some challenges, and I think what we're seeing in some customers is that the trust between developers, between management and senior management isn't quite there. And one of the things you've got to do to enable governance is to be able to report metrics, to be able to report your actual status and do it, share that information effectively, and more importantly, to be able to share that in a trustful manner. And the trust isn't there in many companies, and I think we're going to have to help build up trust over the years now.
And remember, in the manifesto, you're probably reacting to the one that speaks about responding to change versus over-following a plan. But if you read the entire manifesto, it says, hey, there's value in the items on the right. So even the manifesto itself notes that following a plan, it's not an inherently evil thing. But theirs is an issue of priority, that dealing with resilience is more important than anally following a process.
Exactly, and I think what we're seeing in a lot of organizations that are moving to Agile, including IBM, is that we're focusing more on providing reasonable guidance and direction, and leaving the details up to the team. So as long as you stay within the bounds and focus on what you need to do, but still do it within the constraints of your organization, then that solves a lot of the issues. There's obviously still all the reporting issues and sharing information, but at least just sort of defining the sandbox you're allowed to stay in is a step in the right direction.
And I really like the two phrases that were used here. One is the notion of trust, that in the presence of trust, then it's a lot easier to have a process that is a little bit more resilient to change, because you've calibrated the people around you, you trust them and know them personally. The other thing that was noted is the notion of reasonableness. And if it's not reasonable, it doesn't smell right, then something is wrong there. And if the smell continues to happen, then you need to do something about it. And that's really what the manifesto is saying. Don't get so locked up in a process for the sake of the process itself. If it smells bad, go seek out the source of that smell and do something about it rather than live with that smell.
That makes a lot of sense. So, one of the questions I have is are there challenges in Agile projects around government compliance, regulations, and so forth?
Well, I think it's the exact same challenges actually that traditional teams have. You need to understand the regulations that you need to conform to. You also need to actually read the regulations. I find a lot of developers will not read the regulations, not really understand what they need to do, and then because of that lack of knowledge, they just believe whatever they're told. And so if you let the bureaucrats interpret the regulations, you will often end up with a very bureaucratic response. If you let the practical people interpret the regulations, you'll end up with a very practical response. And there's a fairly good history now of Agile teams actually working in regulatory environments. There's been case studies and articles written about this. I know for a fact that the FDA is happy to see Agile projects. They're a little skeptical, and they should be, but they're very open-minded, because they're more interested in the quality and addressing risks. So as long as you can show that you've done that, and this is something Agile teams are very good at, then you can definitely survive an audit, often with flying colors.
I'd observe also that if you reframe your question and say, if I have process X, how does it play with these government regulations? You could apply any phrase for X, be it Agile, waterfall, you name it. So there are inherent issues in dealing with the often complex, multitudinous, and sometimes self-contradictory regulations that are out there. But note that many of the things we're talking about in the Agile notions really deal with principles at the micro level, certainly also the macro level, but more so on the micro level in terms of the social interactions and the other kinds of interactions among individuals who trust one another in a development team. And so the general rules that we'll see in regulations tend to be at the higher level, and there are places where these overlap and conflict with one another perhaps. But if you go back to the principles of reasonableness, then there is no conflict there.
Right. Makes sense. So, can I ask you guys, what is Rational doing these days to, address governance and Agile environments combined?
Well, we're doing a couple things. First, in products like RTC, Rational Team Concert, we're seeing project dashboards that report real-time metrics or near real-time. Some of them some of the trends are calculated, and it takes an hour or so sometimes, but they're pretty close to real-time. And that sort of information, when management knows what they're looking at, can really help them to get a handle on what's actually happening. And this goes back to the visibility issue that I was talking about earlier. Agile work and Agile project teams are much more visible to management than traditional teams, and this makes them easier to govern.
I can't speak authoritatively for Rational anymore because I am beyond Rational these days. You know that I'm actually with research. But to that end, I can point out some of the things going on in research also that are amplifying what's been happening inside Rational as well. We're the folks that worry about the next 3 to 5 years and therefore are concerned about breakthroughs, innovations that will help the next set of product streams. There are a couple of things going on, actually 3 things going on in that space that come to mind. We have a team working on architectural governance, looking at what are the ways we can instrument projects to provide the right kinds of metrics to organizations. And this is great because it means you can deal with measuring things that really cost little for the developer themselves, and not just in the measuring things, but also looking at processes as well. We also have an effort in conjunction with some of the Rational folks looking at how one builds financial models to support the evolution of a system during its iterative release, a concept that's fundamental to Agile notions. And lastly, and this one's a bit more further out and exploratory, we're really looking at what the enterprise application lifecycle itself is, because we're speaking here mostly of the rhythms within a single team, which is exactly right and useful. But if you look at an enterprise as a whole, it's not just a single rhythm, it's not just a single process, but it's the overlapping interactions of multiple rhythms simultaneously. And we're taking a look at really what that's all about. So those are the 3 things that we're dealing with in research that are applicable to this Agile work.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I appreciate your insight, guys, and I do want to talk a little bit more about one other topic that's on my mind. Talk about next time is really talking about the holistic projects that companies are doing, whether they be greenfield or brownfield or legacy in nature, and how if Agile can work for all of those. And so if you want to get together next time, we'll chat about that.
Sure, it works
Definitely
for me. You bring the coffee, I'll be there.
All right.
Me too.
To find out about upcoming UK events on some of the topics discussed, visit ibm.com/IT solutions/UK/agile-events.